Here.
Harding.
Here.
Big Sanders.
Here.
Givens. Gertis.
Here.
Thank you. Committee members, we have an agenda before us for today's meeting. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. Next, we have with us the approval or the minutes for the January 22nd, 2026 meeting of the committee. I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Now for our new business, we have two items today. First up is a continued discussion on a referendum during the 2026 general election to allow for a longer lease term for expansion of the Maritime and Defense Technology Hub as part of the Hub 2 plan. And joining us for this discussion today, we have Jason Mathis, the CEO of the St. Petersburg Downtown Partnership, Allison Barlow, Executive Director of the St. Pete Innovation District. We have Assistant City Attorney Brett Pettigrew and City Development Administrator James Corbett. In the last meeting, there were a couple of works in progress as far as backup information to talk about the status of the hub, the feasibility of the expansion, and what that might look like. And so I wanted to turn it over to Jason and Allison first to go through that information with us that's in the backup.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Driscoll. And it's always great to see you all, and thanks always for your service. This is a follow-up to a meeting we had a few weeks ago, so we can be very brief, recognizing the value of your time. As we talked about last week, we're going to go through just quickly the feasibility analysis, the pro forma for the project that we've developed, the site analysis, some conceptual designs, and the hub average salary. And these are all things that were requested by the committee when we met a few weeks ago. We had talked at the time about the HRNA study that was being produced and had one of the authors for the study call in from Atlanta. The study is complete. We've provided a full copy to you. The summation of the study is that there is indeed great need for this. The facility will be successful, we believe. It will be fully occupied based on the experience of the existing Maritime and Defense Technology Hub and current office vacancies in downtown St. Pete. But it will also fill a very specific niche in terms of expanding our marine science space for St. Petersburg. So that study is complete. You've got it in your packet. Happy to answer any questions about it. But the quick summation is that it will be very successful. As part of that study, there was a feasibility analysis, and we also asked for a pro forma. This was created for us by Mac Feldman with Feldman Equities, making some basic assumptions. There's a pro forma in the study, and this pro forma is off a little bit. They don't match up exactly. There were some different assumptions. But the bottom line for both pro formas is that it will be successful, that the project will pencil, that there's demand for it, and that the costs and expenses should balance out for the project. So we're very confident about the direction that we're going with this. And I actually, at first I was concerned that the pro formas didn't match exactly. And Allison reassured me and said, well, that's actually good because people have different opinions. Like if you get an appraisal on a house, Councilmember Gabbard will certainly know that. Different appraisals say different things. Yeah, they're both competent. But the bottom line for both pro formas was that it would be a successful venture, and that we could move forward with some confidence.
So another piece that we've been working on and we included in the packet was just an overall look at the site analysis. And this was conducted by Matt Walker when he was at George F. Young. Looking at the zoning is compliant with the project that we're talking about, so no need on that change. We looked at the FAA height limitations and have been staying within the existing height requirements and limitations, and actually have the opportunity, if we were at some point wanting to go even a little bit higher, we could, but we don't expect that at this point. The next piece is also looking at the FEMA maps, looking at elevation, looking at the elevation of the current building versus the proposed elevation moving forward with this building. And I've actually, go ahead to the next one, had some more detailed conversations looking at grades in the parking lot and different things like that. So already starting to anticipate what kind of potential site preparation would need to happen at the location. The current building does elevate. It's a gradual slope, but we are considering an additional elevation of maybe up to 3 feet on the new building as well. Part of the consideration on that is making sure that we don't create a ramp coming out of the bays that would shoot things off the back of the building, as you guys can imagine, if we make it too tall. So, but we're getting creative on how we might manage that and get the proper elevation. Go ahead. Also looking just generally at the site analysis, it is part of a larger parcel. That parcel extends from the parking lot is to the west of the port building all the way to the gate of the Coast Guard. So we had to subdivide the parcel and identify that particular site. So that's what that is doing. So this is just a little bit of what some of the high level analysis, this is what Matt had put together for us that we've been working on. And that's in your backup as well. Keep going. And you all are familiar with the location. The next set of slides, we looked at we shared with you the floor plan ideas that we had in the last deck. We wanted to share the full packet. So that is also in here. So looking at the location, go ahead. Some of the principles that we're trying to do in here with examples that you see are communal spaces, limited, but still having a little bit of communal. You guys know how important that is in the hub today and will be moving forward. Next slide. The next is to also create we're talking about multitasking the communal space to also be collaborative workspace. So we could set it up with power, with Wi-Fi, things like that, so that people have a little bit of an area where they could sit, have a meeting informally, and also work if they would like. Waterfront connection is the unique differentiator, as we've talked about in our previous meeting. Having something like this in a secure port, it is one of the few areas in the Tampa Bay region that we're able to do this. And having that direct access with the first floor being bays out to the water is going to be critical to this project. We did include a rooftop area, both as a revenue generator as well as an amenity area that can be leveraged by all of the stakeholders. So that's a conceptual design. It also actually creates a space where we can do some solar power and things like that with the overhang. We're looking at different ways, and I've been talking to Claude Tankersley about different ways that we could get a little creative in some of the resiliency and actually energy efficiency planning on this.
I'll just add,
Mhm.
one of the criteria that we're looking at in terms of some of the funding from the county provides a lot of extra points for environmental sustainability. So it's great when doing the right thing also generates revenue to build the building. So we're excited about that.
Yeah. One of the things you've heard me talk about is leveraging a shared lobby, both from an operational standpoint that helps us streamline operational costs. You're not operating two lobbies, two areas, but it also creates more security parameters. And so you have a single point of entry for any guests that you can track and be able to do that. So this is just an image of what could be on that area. And then this is the schematics. We'll just fly through here with the building on the bottom right, left, the existing hub to a little bit to the right there, that box, and then a proposed parking area that would actually be a joint parking garage that we're also working independently with the airport and the port to look at doing a joint shared parking in the future. This is what the front potentially could look like. If you're familiar with the hub today, it's on the left where there's a little driveway today. It's where you see those steps up. The lobby would actually be part of the new building. The two buildings wouldn't be actually physically connected, but connected behind the fence line, that facade that you see. So you would walk into the lobby, then go outside for a moment to get into the old building or stay into the new building. This is the water side of the view at this point. The bays are the predominant feature with a little bit of that shared workspace on the right side that would lend out to the wharf. Rooftop view, and you can see sort of our ideas around solar just to get it started. I would say there's a lot of opportunities in this area. One of the challenges, I'll be transparent around, we looked at retrofitting the existing hub for solar and it was so costly. So building these kinds of things from the ground up is a much smarter move. And so we're looking at all the options. Geothermal is another thing that we've been considering. So lots of different ways that we'll work with Claude and his team about what they would like to see too. keep going. This is one area, some of you may know, there's a program through NOAA called Science on a Sphere, and it's a really neat program. It's a 360 sphere that actually uses high-tech cameras and shows different weather patterns. You can do different storytelling. You could do all kinds of really neat educational programs. St. Petersburg has always been on the list to get one of these, but we've never had a place to put it. And so one of the thoughts we have is to put it in that collaborative area in the new hub expansion. So that's what that image is showing here. Certainly, as things get tweaked and we figure this out, we'll see what makes sense. But I think it would be a really fun additive. We get a lot of student tours through the hub because we're bringing them through to see different employers. In fact, we have tons of kids coming in tomorrow in conjunction with the mayor's office and the Grand Prix. It would be a great amenity, extra thing to be able to show them and do little educational programs. So that's part of what we're thinking. This is a view looking on 8th Street facing west. So the new expansion would be on the right. The parking would be new expansion on the left, parking on the right, and then just sort of conceptualizing potentially the re-envisioning of 8th Street Southeast in the future. Again, another view of what it could look like. A question that we were asked in our last meeting was, what's the average salary for full-time employees at the hub? It is $91,500.
So the next steps would really be to support a referendum on the fall ballot. And I think James has some additional ideas that we're going to share with you this morning as well. And then we are working on these two very specific grants, the Economic Development Agency grant and Pinellas County Employment Sites grant. The partnership, the Downtown Partnership and the Innovation District are happy to do the legwork, do the bulk of the work, but we will need to rely on the city to help with some of the grant applications. So really two very specific grants. And again, as a reminder, we're not asking the city to provide funding for this. We would be looking for a long-term lease on city-owned land to help support this facility.
All right, thank you. So before we move on to discussing the draft language, does anyone have any questions about the study, the pro forma, or the plan? Councilmember Harding?
Thank you, Chair. Fantastic work. This is pretty neat. Do we have preliminaries on total cost?
I'm so glad you asked that. Just this morning,
Yeah, we just got
we
another
received
update.
an update, and this came in a local construction company. We've asked them to look at it. We were looking at a budget of about $30 million for this facility. Allison, yeah, I'll let you.
Okay.
It's your news.
We've had one of the construction companies we've asked to give us a quote. And so they've broken it down. They're coming in a little below 30 million. We think that's a little low and we're going to go back to them. We've also been reaching out with Brajesh because this will be a contract through the city for the construction. And so there'll be some additional costs, project management costs and other things. So we are, based on your feedback today, our next step would be to sit down with him, bring these quotes and look at what the city's thoughts are on those.
But the total number that we got from,
Oh, today we got 26,827.
and we can provide the breakdown of what
Yeah.
that looks like.
And will you talk a little bit about the grants were through what agencies and?
Sure. So the Economic Development Agency grant is a federal grant. It's interesting. We've been talking with these guys for several years, and they had said, we think we can probably help you out with $3 or $4 million for this facility. And I said, well, this is the same grant that was used to help build the ARC Innovation Center, now Spark Labs. And they said, and that was significantly more. And they said, well, that was because there was a hurricane and there was all this additional money that was available. Don't hope for a hurricane to get more money. But if there were to be a hurricane, there would likely be additional funds available. Sadly, there was a hurricane, not just one, but two. And so we believe that amount will probably be about $18 million, $16 to $18 million that will go towards this facility. Pinellas County Employment Sites grants proposal. We actually had a meeting with them just yesterday and talked about that. We believe that that could be $2 to $3 million. And then originally this site had been slated for another project that we were looking at with NOAA, and the Ports Council was potentially going to provide some funding for that. That was back in 2017, and that amount was $8 million. But we've had some good conversations with the Ports Council in Tallahassee and think that that could be 10 to 12 million as well. So that would again be with the city's support, with David's support from the Port of St. Pete. But there should be very significant public sector support to help build this facility.
So just to be clear, Jason, you want us to say yes to giving you no money and building something for us?
Correct. That is the ask.
We do need your help.
We're in uncharted territory. Thank you very much, and congratulations. This is an awful lot of work that's gone in so far. I appreciate your dream, and I appreciate you making this happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank
Councilman.
you. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, so as of late yesterday, and I do apologize for the lateness of the second one, but we now have two draft ordinances to consider. One is based on our previous conversation, which was regarding a 50-year lease to the Innovation District to make this happen. But since then, James has come up with what I think is an even better idea that is more consistent with the airport and allows for some flexibility for us around the port. James, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. And good morning, committee members. First of all, I will not take credit for the idea. I will give credit to Brett. This was he actually brought up this possibility as we were discussing it. So again, I would apologize for not getting this information to you sooner. We got the document after the backup was due, but if you all recall at the last meeting at the end, there was a discussion about the forthcoming Port Master Plan. And as a part of the Port Master Plan, there are going to be conversations about MRO as well as a terminal facility. And we know that as we move forward, we will likely have additional public-private partnerships that will help fund some of these improvements in the Port Master Plan. So the thought was, could we do something where we could enter into long-term leases with partners to build out the port that wouldn't require a referendum for every single one? At the meeting, we were focused on the hub too, because the hub has been down this path much longer than the Port Master Plan process. So in talking to legal, we wondered if there was a way that we could effectuate the ability to have longer term leases on the entire port site without having to go to referendum every time we had a new development. So it was brought to my attention that I believe it was back in 2004, the airport made a change to allow 25-year leases on the airport site. So right now we can do a 25-year lease at Alberta Airport. It doesn't require additional referendum. It's just working out the lease documentation. So it sounds pretty simple, but it could be as simple as adding the port to the list of city facilities that allow 25-year leases. That would then allow us to enter into a 25-year lease with Allison and Jason through the Innovation District and Downtown Partnership. But as other partners come along, we can enter into this 25-year lease without having to go back for a referendum. Now, I'm explaining it very simply. Brett can probably do a lot better justice on explaining the process. But essentially, it would be putting the port on the list of the facilities that can have a 25-year lease. And that's essentially the documentation that we provided yesterday. Brett, I don't know if you want to add any context to that.
Happy to do so. Not sure which mic to use.
You
Cover in
can
the
have
middle.
two.
Got two.
Right hand.
So two more than I should perhaps be given. So thank you for that. It's the 1984 Park and Waterfront map establishes a baseline limitation for leasing for 109 parcels of park and waterfront property in the city. Most of them are 3 to 5 years, depending on whether they're residentially zoned or commercially zoned. One of them has a 25-year limit already, which was the Bayfront Center, but it's to do an arena, and the arena is no longer there, so that one's moot. But there are 6 of them that have a 10-year lease limit. One of those is the port. In 2004, actually both the Whitted and the port were put on to be given 25-year lease limitations. The Albert Whitted referendum item passed. The port one did not. I'm not sure why. Perhaps it wasn't ripe at that time. But there's already a section in the charter that says properties with 25-year lease limitation. 1, Albert Whitted. There is no 2. So this is essentially would be doing something very similar that was done, and it's the simplest change to the charter I've ever written. It literally just adds 2, port, parcel E, which is its designation on the map. And as discussed in the findings, what was discussed last time, that when you're doing one lease at a time, it usually makes sense to go and seek the voter approval to have the lease that exceeds the standard threshold. In this case, when you're looking at redeveloping the entire parcel, you would have to go to the voters for each one of those leases. That could create delay and uncertainty and could create a patchwork effect where if you've got 3 different long-term leases that you're taking to voters and only some of them get approved, then you've got permission to go forward with some of your plan and not all of it. And the potential advantage of moving the overall lease limit to handle the kind of public-private partnerships that Administrator Corbett was talking about is you have that set up in advance. So when you go out for RFP, you're accepting proposals that know they have 25 years already, as opposed to a proposal that even after the city accepted it would then still need to go to voters. And if it wasn't accepted by the voters, you would have to go all the way back to square one perhaps and start the whole process. So both go to the voters, both require majority approval by the voters, both get noticed to all of the owners and residents within 200 yards of the affected parcel. So in terms of what this would look like on the ballot, procedurally, it's the same timeline, it's the same notice. It's really just a matter of are the voters going to be asked to approve one particular lease or a change to the lease limitation that then would be used to negotiate the longer term lease to the hub and any other lease on that property. So happy to answer questions about either of the ordinances before you. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Questions? Council Chair Hanowitz.
Thank you, and thank you all for being with us here today. I wasn't part of the original conversation because I'm on this committee, but after I heard the 50-year lease, I had concerns because frankly, if it's going to voters, you have to be very careful what you're asking for. Unless you really need 50 years, you could ask for problems. And so that was one of my concerns. And I knew the Port Master Plan was coming in my committee in March and how those two would fit. So I was very happy to see this because I will tell you, to me, it's a simple thing. You read the referendum language that you have on the 50-year lease and you read the one on the port. If I'm an average voter, this one makes sense. The one that was just handed over yesterday. It's simple and it's clear and you understand why you would need 25 years. And this is no comment on the Marine and Defense Technology Hub, and don't take this the wrong way, but the average voter doesn't know what that is, period. Dolly has 99 years. People know what Dolly is. That's why. Asking for 50 years for something specific like that, you're taking a huge risk. That's my only concern. It's not a negative comment on what you do. I think the work you do is great. My concern would be, can the voters, if something goes before the voters, is going to pass? And I will tell you right now, I think the language, and Brett, fantastic job. It's clear, it's simple, and you want to make sure that a referendum is as simple as it can be. And the reasoning is clear, especially when it comes for our waterfront. People are not just going to happily say, okay, we're going to approve a 50-year lease. So that's the only comments I have. I think that the 25-year lease makes sense, and that'll make it easier for future projects. So thank you. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Gabbard.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the second presentation. I'm sorry I was not able to be here for the first, but I did go back and watch it. And so my only question, because I do agree, I think that this approach that we've been brought here at the end is probably much more likely to pass. It is much clearer. I think it's clearer for us as, future councils look to the charter for what they can do. My only question, I think, is because the original was 50 years, this one is 25. Can you just speak to that? And does that create any complications in any sort of funding, capital stack, anything like that?
Yeah.
No, we're fine. I think this makes a lot of sense. Both we've been talking a little bit with the funders about this, and so far no concerns. Particularly because we would probably ask for an option.
Yeah.
So that would get us maybe naturally closer to that period of time, or any time period that they say, hey, we want 30 years, 40 years, whatever
Okay.
it looks like. Secondarily, from a bigger perspective, from my innovation district hat, this makes sense for the port. The idea is like last time, I don't know if we jokingly talked about a crane, right?
Mhm.
And the need for some enhancements in the infrastructure. And David Worth and I have worked on that. Well, gosh, if we find the right crane to bring there, I don't want to sit on it for 2 years waiting for the ability to have it come here. So 100% agree with this decision. It's
Okay.
one of those smart moves that makes it much better to deal with the port.
And much more transparent, I think,
Yeah.
for voters as well.
It is a great question though, because that was one of the things is how do you arrange financing? What are the
Right.
expectations for the federal government about the useful life of the building?
Mhm.
But we are very supportive of the 25-year thing. I don't know anyone in the room that doesn't like the 25-year idea. So we're
Yeah.
very happy with that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? All right, one question that I have. We want to make sure that the Innovation District, having the lease, will be able to lease to their tenants through this. And I want to make sure that the language doesn't create a challenge or prohibit the Innovation District from leasing space to their tenant entities.
So, great question. This just moves the current bar from 10 to 25. That flows through. That applies to all the term used in the charter is lease, but it's expansively defined to be lease, license, sublicense, sublease.
Okay.
It's all of the things. It flows
Okay.
all the way down. So this provides perhaps more assurance that it can be subleased for that period of time. A sublease couldn't go over 25 years. It wouldn't have to be 25 years, but it could go up to 25 years. And I know there's been some discussion with subtenants about having them contribute to the build out. But again, like them, if they're going to finance the build out, they need the same duration to make that financing for the build out make sense.
Yeah, and I'll just add, our current lease agreements with the tenants or sublease agreements do reflect our agreement with the city. So it's specifically outlined in there so that it does not violate in any way our agreement with the city.
Okay, excellent. All right. Any new comments, questions? Did you all have any final thoughts to share on this part? Okay. It sounds like there's some agreement here. And so committee members, I will entertain a motion for requesting that the ordinance regarding a 25-year leases for the port be sent to city council for the public hearing process,
So moved.
Along with first reading and the notice of that first reading.
along with the first reading and the notice of said reading.
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Secondly, we have a second ask here today, and that's requesting that the administration engage with the Innovation District and the Downtown Partnership for the grant applications for the Economic Development Agency and the Pinellas County employment sites, providing with the Innovation District and the Downtown Partnership providing technical assistance and support to the city team for those applications. So I'll entertain a motion requesting the administration's cooperation on that.
Move to approval.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right,
Thank you all very much.
thank you.
Great job.
And thanks to everyone, committee members and non-committee council members for these conversations. This is something that I've been working with Jason and Allison on for a long time. And it's really exciting to me that we're at this point and moving forward with something that's going to really boost our profile in marine science, in resilience, and create a lot of jobs in the process. So thank you. The next item that we have for today is a discussion on the advantages of the community benefits agreement since its adoption. For that today, we have Economic Development Manager Andrea Falvey. Councilmember Fix Sanders, I believe this was your new business item, so I'd love to offer you the opportunity to introduce it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for being here today. And as we know that this community benefits program was a true labor of love by a lot of community advocates, as well as those concerned with development for the city of St. Petersburg and what that development will actually contribute to the city in some of the areas that we need some attention to be paid to. So this was something that started way back in 2016. We finally got it across the finish line, and we celebrated our 5th anniversary with this. And so although today, you know, I want to look at the advantages of utilizing the CBA program and to actually reintroduce it to some of our new council members, please let it be clear that there are a lot of things that we would still love to see changed, updated, addressed, because we're still operating on something that was 5 years ago. And we know how times change. So I want to thank you for coming to make the presentation on the CBA. And Mr. Corbett already knows I'm going to be in his ear after this meeting is over, so that we can move forward with some of the changes that have been proposed and some of the changes that, you know, we're hoping will happen in the future moving forward. So thank you this morning for bringing the presentation to us.
Oh, my pleasure. Good morning, Andrea Falvey, Economic and Workforce Development. And let me just again, thank you all for the opportunity. I see I have almost all of you here today, so that's fantastic. And this looks a little bit confusing. It is a little confusing, but we'll step it through, and we're certainly happy to answer any questions as we go through. So we just wanted to get started with a little bit of an overview of the community benefit program. Again, this isn't something that we've had a lot of applicable projects for. So every time we step through it, we always want to do a little bit of level setting. So we all kind of understand the program a little bit better. So as Councilmember Fix Sanders alluded to, the community benefit program was adopted by City Council in July of 2021 to address the lack of benefit to economically disadvantaged communities amid the rapid pace of real estate development in St. Petersburg. And the policy requires qualifying development projects receiving public assistance, city assistance, to deliver measurable impacts in the following key areas, which you'll see on the screen: business equity, contracting with small and minority-owned firms; workforce equity and development, hiring apprentices and disadvantaged workers; sustainability and resiliency; affordable and workforce housing; and other community priorities, such as supporting the arts, health, education, and technology initiatives. As I'm sure you saw in the backup material, one of the changes that we are contemplating is an alteration to the process. But I did want to, again, level set with what the current process for the community benefit program is. So the current trigger for the program is a developer that is receiving city participation on their project submits something called a community benefit impact report to the CBAC. And then the developer would request either the streamline or the standard process to step through. And that's made in conjunction with the city person of designation, or POD, which is just a point of clarity. I wanted that POD is referenced throughout some of the documents. So I wanted to explain what that stood for. So the streamline process, as you all can see in the backup materials, That is a very rigorous set of kind of predetermined community benefits that that developer would have to agree to. And then the standard process allows them, based on what tier they would fall into, based on their city participation, that would be, they could choose from kind of the menu that's in the guidance document. So the streamlined, they're able to kind of skip over some of the process because those community benefits are you know, it's a pretty high bar for what they would have to do. And then, or the standard process, which the standard process is what we're contemplating changing as we move on. Then the city would conduct a public meeting. Then there would be the selection of community benefits. Again, this goes back to the streamlined and the standard. In the standard process, the developer would select benefits based on what tier they fall into, and that is already prescribed for them. That menu of available benefits is described in the CBA guidance document. They also have the ability to propose alternative community benefits that can be considered by the city and the CBAC. So right now, this just describes what the current tiers are. So tier 1 is any project with city participation value equal to or greater than 15% of the total construction cost. Tier 2 is city participation value equal or greater to 20%. Tier 3, 25%. The minimum city participation value is $500,000. And a project with city participation value above 30 million is tier 3, no matter what the total construction cost is. The city would then seek CBAC input, and based on that input, the final community benefit agreement would be presented to City Council for consideration and approval. So as of today, we've had 2 projects that were covered under the ordinance. The first is the 800 block redevelopment. So in May of 2022, Moffitt Cancer Center and the TPA group proposed a mixed-use development for a cancer center, residential tower, and a hotel. The CBAC project committee meetings were held over that summer between June and August. And then following negotiations between the city and the developer, the CBA put forward a list of recommendations that included an increase in affordable housing unit. That project, however, was terminated in August of 2022 because it was determined not to provide sufficient community benefit. The next project is, of course, the historic gas plant district development. So in December of 2023, the Hines, the Tampa Bay Rays development team, proposed large mixed-use development plans that included office and hotel space, residential units, entertainment, community space, and more. In winter of 2024, the CBAC project committee meetings were held, and they did produce a revised draft term sheet, which increased the number of affordable housing units and provided recommendations surrounding apprenticeship commitments and utilizing disadvantaged workers. They also recommended a series of design and construction standard recommendations. In July of 2024, St. Petersburg City Council and the Pinellas County Commission approved the historic gas plant district redevelopment plans. However, as we all know, in July of last year, City Council unanimously voted to terminate the deal. So even though both of these projects were covered, neither of them came to fruition in our community. So looking forward, we just wanted to, so that's kind of a recap of where we have been. At the end of last year, the current Community Benefit Standing Committee met and expressed a desire to review the existing CBA program to identify potential ways to enhance the program. The Standing Committee outlined goals to improve collaboration and engagement among the development teams, the CBAC, the city, and the broader St. Petersburg community during active projects. After we took that feedback at the December meeting, staff, along with our colleagues in legal, worked on new language and new proposals, which we'll step through here momentarily. We brought that back to the CBAC at that meeting on January 26th. We had further discussion, it was voted on and approved. I just want to take a minute. I see Mr. Mathis has stayed with us in the gallery. He's the vice chair of the CBAC, and also Dr. Ruth Whitney. I just want to thank them so much for their leadership and commitment to the process. It was Mr. Mathis's original ideas that kind of got this conversation started, and we're just really thankful for their commitment to both the committee and to our community. So the first series of changes you'll see up here on the screen are dealing with the Community Benefit Advisory Council, both the standing committee of the council and then the expanded project committee. So right now, the current structure of the standing committee is 4 members, 2 of whom are appointed by the mayor and 2 of whom are appointed by city council. The proposed changes that we're contemplating would increase that standing committee to 6 members, 3 members appointed by the mayor, 3 members appointed by city council. We're also contemplating adding a clause to encourage but not require that the mayor and city council consider member expertise when selecting CBAC standing committee members, so that it be represented by mission-aligned community advocates and professionals in areas such as real estate, affordable housing, business, labor, workforce equity, and sustainability and resiliency. I did just want to take a quick second. In addition to what we see on the slide and then the language that's in the resolution, I did provide a memorandum to you all in the backup. There are 2 little typos in this section on the memo, and that's my fault. I apologize for that. It was an oversight. We went through a couple iterations of it, and it wasn't caught before it got sent out. So what's on the slide is the proposed language, and then you'll also see this. Our colleagues over in legal were kind enough to provide a draft resolution, which was provided in your backup. And the language, the kind of revised language, starts down around the 4th whereas, and that language also reflects what's on the slide and what is being proposed. And you'll see these changes to both the standing and the project committee on this new language that flows through that draft resolution. Another thing I wanted to highlight here before we go on to the changes proposed to the project committee. Of course, we welcome your feedback on all of this. But one thing specifically I wanted to bring to your attention, and we'd really appreciate any guidance you could provide to us. Right now, for the standing committee, there is a stipulation that the 4 standing committee members come from 4 separate city council districts. So we would really love your guidance as to what you would like to do with that current requirement. If you'd like to leave it and have it be a minimum, that the standing committee come from a minimum of 4 council districts, we could change it to be that they do need to represent 6 city council districts. But again, we would be looking for your guidance on that as to what you would like. The next changes that we're contemplating would be changes to the project committee. So right now, the project committee members must be from the surrounding neighborhood or work or own a business in which a covered project is located or within a 1-mile radius. And of course, they must complete financial Form 1. We are not proposing to change that requirement. Right now, the current structure, which again is on the left side of the chart, is 9 members. So that would be the current 4 standing committee members, 2 ad hoc members appointed by the mayor, 2 ad hoc members appointed by city council, and then 1 city council member appointed by the wider body. We are proposing the changes that you see on the right-hand side of the chart. So we would still leave it at the 9-member count, but this would include the 6 standing committee members that were contemplated on the prior slide, 1 ad hoc member appointed by the mayor, 1 by city council, and we would still have 1 city council member appointed by the wider body. And I will make just a quick note here that these changes that we're contemplating regarding the project and standing committee, those can be handled by the adoption of a new resolution, which would supersede the current one. What we're going to step through in terms of changing the process, that would require the adoption of a new ordinance. So the other piece of feedback, in addition to changing up the makeup of the committee, is the CBAC really expressed a desire to be involved earlier in the process. That on the prior 2 projects, it was more of the developer negotiated with the city, and then the CBAC was presented with something, and it was, okay, what would you like to do with that? And they really wanted to change it. And again, staff and administration are absolutely in support of this, is to bring the CBAC into the process a little bit earlier so that the developer and the city can hear from the CBAC and the community through them. What are their needs? What are their priorities? Is the developer contemplating community benefits that really aren't of interest to that particular community, but maybe they don't know of other things, or maybe they want affordable housing to be more, or they want resiliency to be more, whatever it is. But we want to try to incorporate that feedback a little bit earlier so it'll inform the negotiations. So we're so thankful for legal to provide this to us. So we thought the easiest way to present it would be just to take the current city code that deals with the CBA and make a red line version, or in this case, green lines. It is green on the sheet. And just to go through the changes, and you can see kind of how that would reflect in the city code, and to see what's being struck out and then what remains. So one of the things that we wrestled with is, if we're currently, as we talked about on the previous slide, the current trigger for the program is the submission of this community impact report. And so we were really wrestling with what would be then the trigger, because it's the determination of the city participation value that would let the city and the CBAC know that it is a covered project, and that the process can start. So we were really wrestling with what would then be the new trigger. And I really want to thank Attorney Busias and Attorney Dyer for their creative thinking, because we were struggling with this a little bit. But we came up with this introduction, and this is here on the slide, of the proposed covered project concept. And what that would be, so this new language, which you'll see at the bottom of the page 2 of the ordinance, inserted there in green, it introduces this concept of a proposed covered project, which means a project for which the city has selected a developer. The city participation in the development is proposed and under evaluation by the city, and the city reasonably anticipates that the city participation value will meet or exceed the minimum threshold for a covered project, even though the actual city participation value and tier designation have not yet been determined. So because we have introduced this new trigger into the process, it does then necessitate that the standard process then would change. So you can see, obviously, and I apologize for how densely populated this slide is. You can see, starting at the bottom of page 5 in the Green Line Ordinance, how the standard process would change with this introduction of the proposed covered project language. You can also see that we're not taking anything away from the CBAC. We're not removing any of the opportunities for public input. We're simply adding to it and bringing them in a little bit earlier to hopefully inform the process. So again, if the city knows that we have a proposed covered project, the Community Benefits Advisory Council, the project committee, will be established for the covered project or proposed covered project. And after the developer selection and prior to determination of the city participation value, the developer must meet with the CBAC. So that is a change. So before that city participation value is determined, the CBAC is brought in. And the purpose of the meeting is for the developer to present the proposed covered project, the developer's request for city participation, the developer's proposed community benefits, and to receive input from the CBAC regarding community priorities, concerns, and desired community benefits. The city shall conduct a public meeting to seek input from the surrounding neighborhoods and community on the community benefits being proposed for the covered project or proposed covered project. And then at that point, the city participation value will be determined. If the city participation value does not meet the minimum threshold, so after the negotiations are complete, if it's determined that the city participation value will not be high enough to be a covered project, then no community benefit agreement is required. That project committee is disbanded and the development can move forward. If the proposed covered project then qualifies as a covered project, so we have that city participation value determined, they would be subject to the ordinance, then the project will be designated as a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. And everything that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation will apply. So they would still have to take the benefits outlined in the guidance document, put the information together, and they would have to come back to the CBAC and step through a process very similar to what we undertook a couple years ago with the historic gas plant. So I'll just take a pause here. Again, thanks for sticking with me as we step through this. I want to give an opportunity to Ms. Dyer and Ms. Bucius if I said anything incorrectly, if there's anything they wanted to add.
If I may, Andrew, if I could, Chair, add, so for city participation value, we have proposed projects. Thinking like, why are we going through all this and we don't know? The thing that will be the city's participation value, the majority of the time, is land value. So we're going to know what the land value is or what the land value appraises at, and we know at least generally what the developer is proposing to offer us for the land value for the land. So what I'm saying is, if we have an appraisal of $100 million, for example, and the developer is offering 50 million, then it's likely going to be, qualifies under the CBA rules. If for some reason we get into negotiations and through negotiations, we get the developer to offer us $99 million, then it would no longer be, an eligible project. But generally, the participation value is going to be through the land. So that's how we're able to know whether a project is likely to be eligible for the CBA process. I just wanted to make that clarification because in both examples that were provided, the reason why it was triggered was because of the land value, and that was the city's participation.
So this last slide here, again, just details what kind of the back end of the standard process would look like, very similar to what we stepped through with the gas plant. There would still be, a non-binding term sheet that would be generated. And again, that would be showed back to the CBAC, for their input. And then all of these things, of course, all of the agreements would come back to City Council for final approval. So that is the conclusion of my presentation, but of course, we're happy to answer any questions, anything you'd like to discuss.
Thank you. Councilmember Fig Sanders.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. There's a lot to digest on this. And so I do have quite a bit that I want to note and have a conversation about and hopefully clarify where I am on some of this. And hopefully I'm understanding some of what was presented. One of the first things I want to note is going to the committees. When I look at some of the things about the mission aligned community advocates and professionals in each areas and things like that, when I think about what the CBA was intended for, I kind of see an unintentional removal of some of our community advocates in this process, and them not being appointed to the standing committee or the 6-member committee. So I'm kind of hesitant on that, and I'm gonna kind of push back on that one. When we so the makeup of the CBAC, I'm kind of uneasy with, because to me, like I said, it's removing some of the community input. And it's how they're being selected. So I'm looking at the numbers. Yes, some are going to come from the mayor. And we generally know that those are going to be the area experts and of higher level. And then those are coming from city council. And me sitting in some of those selection processes, I look for maybe not the area experts, but those that will be impacted the most. And I see that removed from this particular process. Then when we say, you talked about the districts. I know we had this conversation in the CBAC before. If there's something going on in South St. Pete, I think the majority of the feedback needs to come from South St. Pete, because everybody has their own requirements. Every district doesn't require the same thing, the same improvement. So that's my answer with that. Then I am totally, I understand that there's a conversation about moving the community impact report. Absolutely not. We need to know what the developer is going to do, what they plan to do, and how that's going to actually impact. Because if we don't know if the developer is unsure, I understand we're having a public hearing, and I see we're going from 2 now to 1. But if we're not having a public hearing where the developer up front is telling us what the motives are. I know, I heard Mr. Corbett talking about the land value, but the land value isn't what's going to help the residents in that area with what the CBA is supposed to be about. And the community needs to know up front what the developer intends to do to benefit them if they're selected to do that particular project. So removing or considering the community benefit report, to me, I would totally not support that. Because to me, it removes accountability. We used it before when we looked at the community input impact report, when we were sitting in the CPAC to say, okay, this is what they said they were going to do. And I do know during some conversation, things change. I get it. Things are fluid. But the people need to know what's coming out of this project. And again, I've been grateful to sit on both of the CPACs for both of the projects. And the conversation has been very robust. But the main mission was to see what it was. And so when we talked about the streamline process, that was a huge conversation. The community did not appreciate the streamline process, not at all, not at all, because it takes away from the different tiers and the different buckets that they need to contribute in. So the streamline process, I'm not with that. And as far as the because we're letting the developer choose what they want to do and what they don't want to do. We're not having that input, although we're getting the input. We're being heard, but are we being listened to? And are what we're saying being granted when it comes down to that? So we do know that when this was originally proposed, what we agreed to was 50% of what we asked for. It was nowhere near what the community asked for, nowhere near. But we were willing to take this win at the time to get something going. So when I look at what we were presented, I'm looking at the community benefits agreement. I'm looking at what we actually approved back in February of 2021, what was presented. What we're being presented now is so far away from that, so far away from where we are. So I'm hoping that we would have additional conversation. With some of the benefit changes that, you're proposing, I'm just not there, because it's taking away for me a lot of the community input. It really is. It's taking more so from it. So I'm hoping we can have more of a robust conversation. Now, the normal CBAC meetings, there's not a council member sitting on that committee. A lot of times council members are sitting on certain committees. Maybe I need to do a new business item to include a council member sitting on some of those, because we only get involved after all the other steps and processes have been done. So we're hoping that the CBAC is giving us the information, but see, now I see we're trying to change the makeup of the CBAC. So I just don't want to lose that voice. I love all the work that has been going into this. Again, I'm still not with the streamline process, and wasn't from day one. But I just don't want to lose the voices of the community on this. And I would love to see how, and thank you for the breakdown on the different tiers, because even that has changed. Even the tiers have changed. And so this is the first time we've actually had a conversation as the council as a whole in regards to what that looks like. So I'm going to leave it there and listen to some of my other colleagues and their feedback on this. But again, the initial mission of the community benefits program is $2 million or 20% cost of the city, where they would donate into certain tiers. And although we haven't utilized it more, I would love for us to see how we can actually incorporate the changes on this to get more involvement. Because when I have residents talking about all the development going on in the city of St. Pete, and if you haven't seen the Skyway Marina District lately, blink. There's a lot that's going on over there, but none of these areas and in the development is actually doing the original intent of what the community benefits agreement was really meant for. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Givens.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate it. And thank you so much, Andrea. For me, I'm just concerned. I echo some of Councilmember Vic Sanders' sentiments, but I'm concerned really about proportionality, right? Maybe this is a legal question, but when we think about the agreement, for it to be enforceable and legally sound, doesn't the nexus require proportionality for us to ensure that those communities, those neighborhoods, those districts that are most impacted, they have equity, a fair number of members equal representation across the board? Is there anything that is required there as in terms of proportionality to make a CBAC agreement enforceable legally?
Really not sure your question, council member. So are you starting with the makeup of the committee all the way to the proposed agreement is that where, is that?
Yeah,
is
the
that what
makeup
you're
of the
trying-
committee.
The makeup
Yeah.
of the committee. I mean, look, the makeup of the committee is ultimately your decision on how you would like to see the committee made up. I mean, right now, there's a standing committee and then ultimately a project committee of 9 members. So, if council would like to propose other changes, we're happy to draft, or we're happy to, have share an alternative language. This is what this current standing committee changes were recommended, and they're recommending, but again, it's just they're an advisory committee. They're not binding. This is their recommendation. We're happy to entertain any other discussion you would like to have on the makeup and propose language for you to consider at a later date.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. And sorry for the confusion, but that is exactly what I'm looking for. Just some alternative language. I'd like to see, to Councilmember Fig Sanders' point, if there's a development that impacts South St. Pete, I don't think we need more influence from neighborhoods outside of South St. Pete. We want to hear the voices of those residents that are directly impacted, which is South St. Pete residents. So if there is a way for us to ensure that they have a greater voice, that's what I'm looking for, if that makes sense.
Sure. And I just a couple points of clarity. So the current standing committee is, again, the 4 members. And that was something that again, for the recommendations that they provided, they just felt like, and again, this is just encouraged, it's not required. The mayor and city council can continue to appoint the people that they think would be the best fit for the standing committee. But they just felt when they were having their conversations and when they're going through these projects, having folks with some background in what's being talked about was useful, so that someone with, I think Mr. Mathis mentioned Mr. Nissen on our standing committee, who has a background in organized labor. His perspective is really valuable. So that's why. But again, we're not requiring. It's not a requirement. It's just something that could be considered as part of that application process. And then the project committee, as it moves up to these 9 members, those ad hoc members, it would continue to be from that surrounding community. That would still be the mile. So we still would be, including the perspective of the folks from the community. Then the standing committee, would be there, of course, and the city council member. So we do think that, what we're proposing is still, in our opinion, very much matches the spirit of what we're trying to do with the CBA program. And I'll also just address Council Member Fig Sanders' comment on the community benefit impact report. So even that existed as the trigger to start the process. So when they come to that, and that's really the whole kind of the point is, before that report is developed, we would get the input from the CBAC to help inform those negotiations. So we can certainly, when I outlined what would be discussed in that first meeting, we can strengthen that language, to have it be a more formalized report that's broad, or a more formalized contemplation of what they're considering. But then that term sheet would come back. So it's not that there's a strike through on here, but it's not that we're eliminating the report, or we're eliminating the outline of the benefits. We're just bringing the CBAC in earlier so they could help inform it. So the actual, what the benefits are, what the city participation value, that will still be codified in written documents that can be reviewed by the CBAC, because that process that we stepped to for the gas plant, we're still going to go through a very similar process to that. It will just be more informed by the CBAC at the front end.
If I can just talk a little bit about, so the makeup of the committee, obviously that was a recommendation from the standing committee. We're here to get council's feedback on the committee's feedback on that. This is simply a recommendation. As it relates to the community impact report, and as Andrea mentioned, it struck through because right now that is the thing that officially begins the community benefit process. after the the community impact report is submitted by the developer. What we're proposing, and again, I agree, we can put some stronger language. Once the proposed development is, once it's considered to be a proposed development and they make that initial public meeting, likely, I mean, they would need to bring something. Here is what we propose, right? So if you're not calling it an impact report, but they would tell the community, here is what we're suggesting to provide as community benefits. They're going to tell the community that. Because it's early on, the community could say, we don't really care about that. We don't want this thing that you're doing. We want more of that, right? So then that actually gets built into the negotiations. And then once the negotiations and we get a term sheet, we're still going to come back to the CBA. This is an actual document that we're coming back to the CBAC with, which you would equate to the community impact report. The problem with the community impact report being the trigger is that you can't really do that until you have a term sheet. And by the time you get to a term sheet, you've negotiated so much. This is what we heard from the committee, is that use the gas plant, the last gas plant as an example. We went through a long time of negotiation. We came with the community impact report, and it wasn't like if the committee said we want 400 more affordable housing units. That's going to affect all these things that have already been discussed. If we were able to get that on the front end, it could be incorporated in the negotiations. So the idea is not to eliminate the official report that comes back to the committee. The developer would still have their proposal. They would say, here is what we're proposing as community benefits, X, Y, and Z. But the community at that time could say, well, this is great, or we want more of this, less of that. We don't care about any of this. This is what we want. Then when we do the actual negotiations, that we can incorporate as much of that stuff into the negotiations and not come to the CBAC in the end when kind of the framework is already developed, the term sheet is developed. And what we heard from the community benefits group is we felt like it was set. It wasn't really a lot of wiggle room there. There wasn't really a lot of places to move because you now have a term sheet and anything that we do here is going to affect that. If that conversation could have started earlier, we could have incorporated those changes, or maybe the community is asking for something that the developer didn't even realize the community wanted. So that was the idea of starting the process earlier. We're not eliminating the official report that will come back to the CBAC.
Can I respond to that?
Well, Councilmember Givens
Oh,
still has the
sorry.
floor.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I just want to
right,
remind
ma'am.
everyone, we do have, this meeting is technically supposed to end at 9:45. We have our flag raising out front at 10.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty clear that this will be continued.
Yes,
And I will put it on the very next agenda for March 26th for
Okay.
continued conversation.
okay.
So don't worry. But Councilmember Gabbard also wants to speak, and I want to give her that opportunity too. So we'll do, Givens still has the floor.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief. Just one comment that I do support increasing representation from 4 to 6 council districts. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Gabbard.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not a committee member, so I don't have a vote here today, but I certainly am very glad that Councilmember Fix-Sanders went first, because so much of what she had to share, I echo. There were only 3 of us sitting here whenever we created the CBAC or the Community Benefits Agreement. And you're right, that was 50% of what we really wanted. And I have a lot of concerns, way too many to go over in the short amount of time that we have. The impact report being the trigger, I guess a major question I have is, I mean, this worked the first 2 times. It's not that the benefits agreement process did not work. It is that other circumstances caused those deals not to go through. You can write whatever you want in a report or in a PowerPoint, but to be very honest, the first time the mayor canceled it, the second time the developer walked away. It was not this process that did not bring us to a term sheet and the potential for a deal. So I just want to be very clear about that. And that is what gives me a lot of pause, because I'm not sold on what's broken. And if there is something broken, are we really trying to make it better? Are we really trying to make sure that there are more opportunities for more voices? Or is it being even more watered down? And that I don't think we have answered today. Certainly haven't answered it for me. I don't have a vote on this committee. I'm glad to hear it doesn't sound like there's one going to come forward. We have a committee of the whole, I think on March 12th, where we're going to be talking about appointments and all of this again. I don't know why this isn't in the committee of the whole, so the entire council can weigh in and vote on this. I think that that would make a lot more sense. It would give a lot more opportunity for us to kind of hash this out. It would give us more time. If I were a committee member, I would make the motion to move this to a COW. And it could be done on the 12th, but I'm not. So that's my feedback as of now. Until this looks better, I'm not ready for us to do anything, but you'll all make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think before we try to make a move, we do have the privilege of our council chair attending the meeting today and might have an idea off the top of her head of whether or not this could even be taken up on March 12th.
I don't see why it wouldn't be able to be taken up on March 12th.
Excellent.
frankly, Because that's what
Make
we're
that
doing. So the only thing I will say, because there's 4 minutes left, I had a ton of comments on a variety of things outside of, by the way, the stuff that's been talked about. And I guess I'll just talk to legal and you all, and then we can have a further discussion in March. So.
Okay, Councilmember Fig
So
Sanders.
can I make that motion that we move to the cow seeing? that
Yes.
I shared-
Did you have any other
I
comments that you wanted to make at this time?
I did really quickly in response to Mr. Corbett. So I totally agree with CBAC being involved earlier. But what I don't want to do is waste CBAC's time between the community impact report was the accountability that the CBAC actually used to hold the developer to what the initial intent of wanting to develop that project meant. It wasn't to hold them up. It wasn't to differentiate it from the term sheet, but it was used by the CBAC to say, when you came to us initially, this is what you said you were going to do. So it's not that, again, it's not as though it didn't work, but I totally agree with the CBAC being involved earlier. I do, but the impact report to me showed the initial motive of the developer coming into, because we can get all the way down the line and we tell the developer, no, this is not what we want. This is what, and they can say, I'm done because I'm not doing that. So to me, removing it up early shows the committee and council what the true intention of that development project really was and what was the outcome that they planned for the city to benefit from. So I'll leave that there. And I make that motion that we actually carry this conversation on to the March 12th COW.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. I just want to give a couple notes before we take that vote. The standing committee, you've got right now one, they have to all be from different districts,
Correct.
right? Now we're proposing that we also encourage consideration of expertise. I could see that presenting a challenge if you're requiring, if we're considering both or requiring one, considering the other, which one is more important? I believe it's more important to have that expertise, just seeing how this has played out. There could be two people who are perfectly qualified, we really want, but they both live in District 5. I don't want us to lose out on brain power just because of geography.
Right.
So I'll bring that up again on March 12th. And then I have some concerns about having 6 standing members and 2 ad hoc members. The ad hoc members are the ones that have to live within a mile radius. So now you're not taking the city council member into consideration. you've got it set up for 6-2. It's almost like a David and Goliath when you've got 6 standing committee members who do not have to live near where it's taking place, having the power to outvote 2 people from the neighborhood. This is supposed to have a real emphasis on input from those who are immediately impacted. And having only 2 voices within 1 mile out of 9 members is that gives me some concern. So I hope you'll give that some thought before March 12th, because I think that could be a longer conversation. Yes.
I mean, real quick before we, and I realize we're gonna have a real further conversation on March 12th, and we look forward to that. I just wanted to make clear to the committee that these were recommendations that came from the standing committee. We generally supported the recommendations. We brought them before the committee for your feedback. And to answer the question that was asked earlier, what was broken that was fixed, we did come to an agreement on both, but the standing committee, their feedback to us is that they did not feel like the process went as well as it could, and these recommendations were brought forward to improve the process. So the question was asked, what's broken that we are trying to fix? We're trying to respond to the feedback that we received from the standing committee, that they felt like it would have been better if they could be involved earlier on in the process, and this language was trying to effectuate that.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you clarified that. And that reminds me that we need to thank the CBAC members for not only the work that they have done, but for providing these recommendations. There's no better voice than that from a person who's lived it. And these folks lived a lot of, they spent a lot of time and invested a lot of their time and resources into trying to get it right. And so they know from doing the work what speed bumps they encountered and what could be made better. So I do take these recommendations very seriously. And although we may not ultimately adopt all of the recommendations, we're certainly going to give them the respect that they deserve. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you so much. This concludes today's meeting.
We need to vote.
Oh, you know what? We're not concluding yet. We have a motion on the floor to move this discussion to a committee of the whole meeting on March 12th. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Our next meeting is March 26th, but right now we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.